right. Happy Friday, everybody, and welcome back to another future-focused weekly update where hopefully I'm helping you make sense of everything happening at the intersection of business, technology, and the human experience. And this week is an interesting one, to say the least. But first of all, thank you to all of you who watch and subscribe and follow and share and send me messages, all that good stuff. I really, really do appreciate it. If you think of it, please share this with somebody who would benefit from it. Tell your friends, all that stuff. I do this to hopefully help people out. And the more people that know about it, the better, I guess. So here's the warning that I'll give to folks before I get into this. I really enjoy digging into what might otherwise be extremely polarizing topics for the purpose of giving my thoughts on it. And, if you followed me for very long, hopefully you know that my approach does my very best to be understanding and respectful of all parties. That's kind of my commitment to it. At the same time, I recognize that this is very fresh for a lot of folks. And sometimes when wounds are fresh or when you're emotionally charged, hearing both sides of things, hearing a deeper conversation about what we can take, what we can learn from it, that can sometimes be frustrating. So I'll give you that warning, because as you look through the topics I'm talking about, you just think to yourself, if I even hear something about that, I'm just going to lose my mind. Unless it absolutely adheres to how I'm already feeling about it, then maybe take a pause. Maybe take a pause and come back when you've had some time to, calm down a little bit. Because what I can promise you is that's just my warning. I just know myself well enough to know that sometimes just like, I don't want to hear that right now. I'm just too upset, and I need to be upset till I can calm down. And if that's the mood you're in right now, you're probably not going to want to listen to this, because I'm not going to stoke the fire. I'm not going to, get super upset. I'm not going to, blow up any one particular side on anything. I just want to speak to it because everything I'm talking about, I think there's some deeper lessons underneath it that are often lost in the headlines, that are often lost in our emotions and all of that. So there's your warning. You need to pause it and come back later. Go ahead. If you're feeling like, let me give it a shot, well, I'm going to open with a heavy one, so you'll see whether you're really in the mood for it or not by the end of the first topic. So with that, all right, I want to put on a little bit more serious tone, while at the same time I think too lighthearted to get too serious about anything, because life's short and we sometimes just get wrapped up in our own emotions so much we forget that we're all going to die anyway. So here's the first one. All right. The whole situation with Elon Musk and what very much looked like the Seig-Heil. I understand why people were so upset and had such an emotional reaction to it. I saw the video. My initial reaction, I didn't pay any attention to politics or anything, and I just happened to be scrolling through LinkedIn and saw the picture and went, what the heck? But taking my own wisdom and advice, I said, now before I react or say something or comment, I want to make sure I understand what's actually going on here. So I went and I looked up the video and kind of read people's commentaries on it and all of this. And so I understand, and this is where I really appreciate having people that I talk with regularly that are all over the political spectrum, is that I understand why people were very upset. I understand why at first glance that would set off things for a lot of people, not just because of the act itself, but the whole energy that is going right now with the new, political team is really this culture of power and domination, and we're going to get things done. We're going to make America powerful again. So when you combine that with even the appearance of something that seems to send a message that reinforces one of the most horrific situations in modern human history, I understand where that makes a whole lot of people freak out and get upset. And so I'm sensitive to the folks who saw that and had a very emotional reaction. I'll admit, when I first saw it, I was like, what the, and I talked to some folks who it really brought up a lot of fear. It brought up a lot of emotions of where things are going, a lot of things. And so if you're somebody who saw it and sees the people who are getting upset or, freaking out or, doing all this stuff, I get where it can be easy to have a reaction and say, that's ridiculous. Nobody should feel that way or whatever. But you don't get to do that to somebody. It's not okay to say, because I don't understand why this upset you or frightened you. You don't get to do that to somebody. And if you actually talk to a lot of people, all right, granted, there's some people that I think were just upset about it and they didn't even really know why they were upset other than they read a headline. I get that there's that. But there were also some people that I talked to who have experienced some real things in life. And seeing this brought up all of that again. And until you actually have a conversation with somebody and lean in, you don't know. And you don't get to say, because it doesn't make sense to me, you don't get to have that. Because the emotions are real and the feelings are real and the fear is real. And you dismissing it is actually only stoking the fire. And I think that's one of the things that, as I look at it from the side of people who really had a reaction to this, it's one of these things where people don't like how people respond, but then they behave in such a way it only fuels the fire further. So you see a reaction from people, you don't feel it's justified. Your defenses go off because it's an attack at your tribe. And so the response is to gaslight them back or dismiss what they're, and it ends up in this cycle of insanity, absolute insanity. Now, here's the thing. I guess I didn't even give context to this. If you haven't seen the video, I'd encourage you to watch it, because I see it and I go, should Elon Musk, somebody who's one of the most powerful people in the world, he knows he's going to set off a lot of things. He knows, all this stuff. And should he have known better than to make a gesture like that? Yeah. And the fact that people who are dismissing what he did can't even acknowledge that, that was whether he intended to or not, he's somebody who should be at a point where he doesn't do things like that. But I also recognize, and that's where I have a whole suite of complicated emotions with this, because I have a sibling who is severely mentally disabled. And I'm not saying, don't take that as, that's what I'm saying about Elon Musk. But she's autistic is one of the things in combination with some other things. And so I'm familiar with people doing things that don't make sense to me and responding in ways that seem very foreign and unfamiliar and very inappropriate. And so I wrestle with the complexity of that. I wrestle with the emotions behind being at the rally and, all these other things. And so I don't just look at it and, jump all over Elon. At the same time, I also look at it and go, yeah, but come on, it's not helping the situation to completely dismiss that what he did was weird and inappropriate given the context and his inability to say, hey, that's not what I intend. If it's not, if it is, well, then that's another conversation. But if it isn't, if it truly was, I was excited, I was just gesturing to people and whatever, then own it. Then own it and say, but I get it. I get how it looked. I get that. I understand. And that was not where my heart was at. And I'm sorry, for anybody who was offended or hurt by that. And I've talked to people on the defensive side of Elon who can't even seem to wrap their head around that. And that to me is concerning. So, the lessons that I have as I come out of this, or that I think we can all walk away from, is, if you were somebody who had a reaction to it, I think a negative reaction to it. I think one of the things that's always important is I talk about the fact, like, take every thought captive, slow down. I think there were people who were flying off the handle about it before they even really knew what happened. They just saw a picture on social media. And I think that's where you'll see some of the responses of people posting other pictures of image snapshots of somebody's hand in a similar position, because if you catch it at the right moment, it can look like that. And I get that, which is why it's important to slow down and really take the time to understand, what am I really dealing with here? Like, where is this coming from? But like I said, I really empathize with the people who this brought up a lot of pain, a lot of fear, a lot of raw emotions. And to you, I want you to know that I see you and I feel you. And I'm sorry that you went through that this week. That would be very, very difficult, especially given the environment right now. And I see where that's coming from. To the folks on the other side, I just would implore you to have a little bit of empathy and remember that you don't get to tell somebody else whether their fear or their emotions are fair or right. It's not on you to say that. It's for you to understand. It's for you to say, why did that upset you so much? What's really going on? Because for a lot of the people I talked to, it had less to do with the actual action. It was what that action made them think about, or what it brought up, or the fear of where things are going. It wasn't necessarily the action, but when it gets blown up into that, you can't even have a conversation. And so on the other side, if you slow down and actually seek to understand what people are feeling, understand what they're going through, understand why they're having the reaction, you can empathize so much better and say, yeah, okay, I'm sorry that it brought all that up for you. And I'm sorry. And it was weird. It was weird and inappropriate, whether intentional or not. Come on, most powerful, richest man in the world. He should know that a gesture strikingly similar to a Seig-Heil, it's not okay, not appropriate, and just own that. Just own that. And I've heard people go, well, even if he owned it, nobody would listen to it. Well, that's on them then. That's on them. And I think that's kind of my concluding reminder here to leaders or anybody. I mean, we're all leaders. Somebody's looking up to you. Even if you feel like nobody cares about me, nobody looks up to me, somebody does. There's someone in your life who looks up to you. And we're all in this place where I think we can walk away from some of these lessons of, you know what? People are watching you. People are seeing what you're doing. And so your actions matter. And yeah, you're going to make mistakes, but think twice before you do stuff, especially in the internet age where something can be caught out of context and blow up before you even have a chance to respond to it. So just be really careful about that. And if you realize that you did something that hurt somebody, whether intentional or not, just take responsibility for it. Take ownership of it and say, and it doesn't mean you have to admit, yes, I did it for that reason and I'm this deplorable human. No, if you really didn't mean to do something and it hurt somebody's feelings, you can say, I really didn't mean to do that. I didn't mean to hurt you that way. And I'm sorry that it did. I'm really sorry that it did. And I know some people go, you can't say, well, yeah, I'm sorry your feelings are hurt. Well, okay, it's your heart attitude about it. If you really are just rolling your eyes going, sorry you're so upset, you're being a jerk. But if you can sincerely say to somebody, I see how this really hurt or upset you. I promise you that was not my intent. And I'm sorry that it brought that up for you. You should be able to empathize with that. You should be able to say those things. And if you don't, you need to do some hard work and look in the mirror and say, you know what? Hey, but I think we just need to spend some time, because this is just the beginning. Good grief. We're like a week in and we're already blowing up left and right, as you'll see from some of my topics. So that's where I'm at right now. Like I said, I had a whole suite of complicated emotions. So if you were to say, Christopher, how did you feel about it? I felt all the things. That's just tends to be where I'm at. I tend to talk to enough people that I end up feeling the same feelings that everybody's feeling, whether they're on one side or the other. And that's what's hard for me when I watch people tearing each other apart, is I go, if you took the time to get to know people, you might still not agree with them, but you might at least be able to empathize and say, I understand that, and I'm sorry for that, and be there for that. And it'll be reciprocated. Because at the end of the day, the thing I think about with the last thing, and then I'll move on, the people that are like, well, no matter what Elon did, people would do it anyway. You don't take responsibility for your actions for what you're going to get in return. You take responsibility for your actions because it's the right thing to do. And so if you justify doing something and it hurts somebody, and you justify it by going, well, they're not going to care if I apologize anyway, that's a really crappy reason to not. Just do it because it's the right thing to do. And if they choose to not believe you or still treat you like crap, then that's on them. But do everything you can to move beyond it. All right, let's move off of this one. Hopefully your blood's not boiling too much, because we're not done yet. All right, we're not done. So let's transition to some of these executive orders. All right, I'll take a little bit of a break from. We'll get to AI here in a bit. So the one that is another one that is blowing up all over, and I have a lot of friends in the HR space, so this one's been all over there as they're trying to figure out what it means for them. But if you hadn't heard, there's two big things. Now, in my predictions for 2025, I said we're going to see the whole, work from home thing blow up, which we did in these executive orders. The one I didn't include in that list, but I had with other conversations with folks, was that we were going to see, again, this shift away from diversity, inclusion, and this and that. And both of those came up in some executive orders. And I think the thing that upset me about these is going back to even the previous point. There's very much an attitude and an air right now of power, domination, control. And again, I'm not saying that that's what's happening. So don't misquote me and say, oh, so you believe that we're like, no, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, whether it's the intention or not, there's very much an air of we're going to get things done by brute force. And things we thought were stupid, we're not going to have difficult conversations about. We're not going to think critically about. We're just going to bulldoze our way through it. And to me, the federal return to office and the elimination of the DEI roles, which there's a combination of things with the DEI thing. So one, they're basically eliminating all the positions of people who are in a DEI role. And then there's also this other one that is being misrepresented like it's repealing the law for anti-discrimination hiring. It's not quite that. But I understand, again, where people are upset about the repeal of it. And when I've talked to people, again, a lot of these things are less about returning to office, less about the elimination of certain roles in the federal government, less about the executive order itself, and more about this underlying tone of anything I think is stupid, I'm going to just wipe out. And we're going to accomplish things through power and force. And so I know some people personally who have worked for the federal government for a long time. And suddenly they're now facing this whole, return to office situation. And there's 250,000 for sure who are fully remote, probably a lot more who now are going to have to decide, what am I going to do about this? Quite frankly, I think the government's going to run into the same thing Amazon did, where it's like, well, where are we going to put all these people? You can't just order everybody back into a building without doing a quick count of how many desks do you have. But that's not the point. The point is, it sends this message of the flexibility. Like, I don't understand flexibility. I don't understand remote work. So I don't care. And I understand lots of people are going, yeah, they're just trying to get a bunch of people to quit as part of the cleanup. Okay. But once again, it's this power. We do it by force. We don't have meaningful conversations. We don't treat people like adults. We just make sideways, hidden agendas. We hide our agendas behind smoke and mirrors, but really we're just dominating people. And it breaks my heart for people who now might lose their jobs. It breaks my heart that we just continue down this path. Now, to be fair, lest you think, like, believe me, I get the messages from people telling me what they think about my political opinions and all that, which I always find entertaining, because if you've listened to me for very long, I'm like, if you think you know what side of the political spectrum I'm on, you don't know me very well. Because I don't pledge my allegiance to any of our political parties. And so, but where I understand some of the pushback to this is our federal government is grossly overspent. There's bloat all over the place. DEI initiatives historically have been shown little positive impact on things. If anything, they often have the opposite effect, because in an effort to make people appreciate diversity, it puts people into camps, pointing out each other's differences and putting certain people, almost on display for everybody to stare and look at and go, oh, wow, look at the, whatever. And so they historically haven't been terribly effective. And going back to kind of almost reversing from the previous point, if you can't look at the fact that the government's overspent, there's probably lots of jobs that people have been in that haven't really been adding any value to our country. And we've been spending a ton of money because DEI at one point was the flavor of the month. And in an effort to appease the populace, millions, if not tens or hundreds of millions of dollars was spent on jobs and crap that wasn't working. Okay, let's acknowledge that, but let's not respond to it with, let's make some sweeping, foolish, bully type draconian orders to undo it. We missed the mark. And what'll happen is the pendulum's going to swing the other way, while the people who can hold it over there are in power. And then people will get fed up with it and it'll swing back. And it just doesn't accomplish anything other than, honestly, the part that breaks my heart about all this, it's always the vulnerable that get hurt. I guarantee even the return to office stuff, it's not going to be the powerful people who have drivers who are taking them to and from work. They'll still have a desk in a building that they never go to, but they're in the office, but they're important, so they can't ever be there, and it'll be excused. It's the clerk or the whatever who's worked from home for the last 20 years and is barely making it by, that has no reason to be in a building, that suddenly gets the order they have to move, across town or take a 3-hour commute to go into some random building that none of their coworkers actually even work in to appease somebody. That's the person who's going to get hurt. The DEI thing, throwing it out the window. Okay, fine. Maybe the programs didn't work, but having more conversations about the need for us to appreciate our differences and have honest and respectful conversations. I mean, can we agree that that's a good thing? Because I guess if we don't agree there, then that's a bigger issue. But I think many people would go, yeah, I agree that's probably a good thing. And does it really accomplish that when we just throw these things out the window? And so as I look at what's going on here, I think the lessons we can all take is, one, let's slow our reactions to things. And then let's think about, all right, maybe this doesn't affect us personally, but it's going to start, because that's my concern. Some of the conversations that I've had with HR leaders and other business execs is this sent a big message from the most powerful person in the United States that remote work is not seen positively by our new supreme leader. And we don't value diversity. We think it's stupid and we're going to get rid of it. And that's matched by some other behaviors. Now, sending that message is now something that, just like when companies start laying people off, all of a sudden other companies start to do it, because it's like, well, they did it, we might as well too. And I think we're going to see some of that. And I think that's the part that the people who listen to this, I know my audience, you may have an opportunity to push back on, to say, yeah, maybe so what if our supreme leader now, the US president, decided these things are dumb, but maybe we don't. Maybe we take a different way. Maybe we think more nuanced and we think critically, and we include people in this decision rather than just make a sweeping decision about it. And that'd be my encouragement to anybody out there, is maybe you do decide that you need to enact some more some kind of RTO policy. Okay, but take the time to do it well and make sure people come along for the ride and do it with outcomes in mind, not just a random thing. Same with DEI. Maybe you're overinvested. Maybe you bought into the 2020, train and got way too hyped up on it. And now you're like, oh, we kind of got to like reevaluate this. Do it, but do it respectfully and think critically about it. Okay. So here's another one that is, now we're getting a little more technical. So if you're like, good grief, Christopher, if we talk more politics, my head's going to pop. Don't worry. This one's still a little political, but we're moving out of the kind of broader business sphere into the tech sphere. So one of the executive orders that gave me pause was the executive order rolling back the other executive order that was really focused on AI regulation. So I think it was Biden who had put one out that, there was going to require submitting safety results, and it was outlined. I didn't go into the order itself, but it was trying to take a stab at, we need to regulate this stuff. And when I saw, we're going to roll that back, my initial reaction was, well, I'll be honest. My initial reaction was like, we're doomed as a civilization. That was my initial reaction. There's still parts of me that feel that way. But I've since taken some time to look into it, read it, study it a little bit more. At least on the surface, there seems to be a commitment to still figure out what adequate regulation looks like. So is it any surprise to me, again, going back to this attitude of dominance and control and do things by brute force, is it any surprise to me that given the attitude and culture of our leadership right now, that somebody would go, well, the last person's an idiot, and so I'm going to repeal theirs and I'm going to do my own? Okay. No, I guess that shouldn't have really surprised me. Where I'm concerned about it and why I think everybody needs to still be really trying to do whatever they can to encourage and push and demand some sort of regulations around AI is, I'm concerned as I watch Sam Altman and Mark Zuckerberg and these billionaire tech leaders who are all bumping elbows in Washington going, we're going to figure out what regulation looks like. That concerns me a lot. It concerns me a lot because if you've listened to me for very long, you know that some of my biggest concerns about AI is that it has the potential to cause tremendous harm faster and at a much bigger scale than anything we've ever experienced in human history. And so those decisions being made by people who literally cannot even relate to the average human being on the planet. I mean, really, when you think about Zuckerberg, Altman, Trump, like a lot of these people, they're not no different. They're just, their brains and their experiences are like artificial intelligence. They just have no concept of what it's like to be a normal human being in the United States. And so as you think about, so already you're dealing with a really, really complicated technology that is more powerful than anything we've ever dealt with. And now you don't even understand the people it's going to affect, and you're going to try and decide how it should be governed. It does worry me. I will be the first to say it worries me, because I also, going back to the culture of this whole thing, see this attitude of, we're going to make America powerful again. And AI right now is very much an arms race. We've got China with, if you just saw DeepSeek, I think is out. DeepSeek, their AI models are, it is literally like watching the Cold War all over again. But I don't think people are always recognizing that, because it doesn't feel like a war to the average person. To the average person, is like, we're fighting over computers. This seems silly. But it's what those computers will be able to do that makes it much more like the Cold War, where we're sitting here battling over who's going to build the most powerful nuclear weapon and blow the other person up. And that's really essentially what I'm seeing play out right now in the AI regulation, which is why when I saw the repeal, I had a little bit of a freak out moment, because I went, I mean, yeah, of course we don't want to try and regulate it. We want to be able to dominate the world right now. And we're afraid of China beating us to it. So we don't want anything to get in the way of that. And that's going to come back and burn us big time. I did, Michael Spencer, I think he and I have gotten to know each other through Substack. He's a big tech leader and influencer and stuff like that. And we were talking about this. And then I also did a live stream yesterday talking about this, where, we were talking about the fact that what's it going to take for us to actually recognize how important it is for us to at least draw some hard lines in the sand of like, we will not go this direction with this technology, or we will not take it this far. And tragically, all three of us universally agreed that it's going to take some global catastrophe. But that's our prediction. It's going to take some global catastrophe before everybody goes, all right, okay, whether we're at odds with each other, whether we're competing nations fighting for world domination, we at least commit that we're not going to, go this far with it. And it does feel a little bit like Oppenheimer, where, it took 2 nuclear warheads in Japan before we went, oh, okay, maybe we should just all agree we're not going to drop these things on each other as a regular practice. And my concern is, when I think about AI, if we think what happened in Nagasaki and Hiroshima was bad, like I said, AI is a catalyst. So whatever you thought was bad about that, just be prepared for the volume of that to be turned up to 11, because it's that, and that's truly, and I don't say that to be an alarmist. I don't say that to make you, go, I'm going to be able to sleep tonight. Thanks a lot, Christopher. Because that's not my point. But yeah, I'm interested to see where this goes and what we end up doing and what it's going to take. And I'm going to be watching closely to see, what they end up doing with this whole thing. But I'm going to be watching it closely, because we need regulation. And if you're somebody who goes, I don't believe in regulating tech, that's a fundamental problem. And one of the conversations that I had yesterday on this live stream was, while we came from radically different worldviews, one of the things that we both agreed on is that tech is not inherently good. And as it stands right now, tech leaders do not agree with that statement. The big tech leaders believe the technology is inherently good, and the bad it will do is more a outlier rather than the default. And where we both agreed yesterday was, the tech is by default going to cause harm. We have to make sure that it doesn't. And that's where there's a big disconnect. And that's something that, we're just going to have to watch. And I hope that it doesn't get to that. But lest you freak out, well, you might already be freaking out. I might have already triggered you enough. But it was funny, because on this live stream yesterday, or maybe it was in a different conversation, but the point is, somebody was like, well, geez, Christopher, it sounds like you're anticipating a catastrophic global event to have to happen for us to do something, or the train's going to keep running. And I said, yes. And they said, well, so what do you do? Do you just freak out about it? And I said, no. And I normally don't do this, but I quoted this to him because, to me, if you're familiar with Christians a lot, they throw out Jeremiah 29, for I know the plans I have for you, plans for good, all this. And it sounds nice and happy. And I don't think it's all that helpful. And so what I had shared, and this is where my heart's really at with it, was, okay, so Christopher, let's say this is true. Let's say AI is going to go off the rails. We're not going to regulate it. There's going to be a massive global catastrophe that's coming. What do we do? And what came to mind for me is in Jeremiah 29, but it's not the verses most people will quote when disaster is impending. And it's verses 5-7, which is build homes and plan to stay, plant gardens and eat the food they produce, marry and have children, then find spouses for them so that you may have grandchildren. Multiply, do not dwindle. Work for peace and prosperity, the city where you will be sent into exile. Pray to the Lord, for its welfare will determine your welfare. And that, you don't have to share my worldview, but to me, that is the best response that we can take right now. And if you have opportunities to do more, so be it. But to give you some context to that verse that I just said, this is shared by a prophet at the time when Babylon is about to completely and utterly annihilate Jerusalem and drag everybody off into exile. And so to me, I see some of these parallels. Now, I'm not saying that that's what it's going to be, but I'm even just in this, okay, there's going to have to be some global catastrophe for us to change course. Okay. Similar to, Babylon's about to annihilate Jerusalem. So what do? Run, scream, do all this stuff. And what is the recommendation? Have kids, take care of things, go about your business, and just live your lives. And I think in some ways that's the best advice we can take right now is just don't freak out and do the best that you can to put one foot in front of the other, take care of your neighbor, take care of each other, love your neighbor as yourself, and we'll see where it goes. So that might not be what you would have expected me to respond to in light of me saying, I feel like we're going to face some serious global catastrophe in this year, next year, soon, for something to happen. But that's my advice. All right. This one's probably counter to what I just said. So bear with me. But if you haven't noticed, if you haven't used a Google product or a Microsoft product recently, this might be unfamiliar to you. But if you have used them, you know what I'm talking about. Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot are literally everywhere. I mean, they are getting shoved in everyone's face. I noticed it. I used the Google Suite and Microsoft. And all of a sudden, I started seeing pop-ups everywhere of like, hey, Gemini can now do this. And Google Meet, do you want it to take notes? Do you want it to do this? As I'm starting a Google Doc, here, would you like me to write that for you? It honestly was like overwhelmed. I'm like, good freaking grief. I don't need this much assistance on literally everything. It's like having an AI butler, but an annoying one that's like, just, can you get out of the office? Like, I'm busy right now. And it was a little bit surprising for two reasons. One, if you weren't familiar, Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot were the generative AI capabilities, for the Google and Microsoft suites, but they were actually pretty expensive add-ons. Okay. So if you had a work account, you had to pay a pretty significant premium to tack this onto your subscription, which is why a lot of people didn't. I know I didn't. I know lots of people who were like, yeah, I mean, it's nice, but we're not going to pay almost twice what the cost of the actual Office suite is to have this. And all of a sudden, out of the blue, it's free on both of them. So that's what's going on. If you use a Microsoft or Google product, you know what I'm talking about. You've seen the pop-ups all over. And if you don't, and you haven't been in it, just get ready for it, because you might need to take a, I don't know whatever thing calms you down, Ritalin, something like that. I don't know. But anyway, Xanax, there it is. But here's what I think is interesting about it that doesn't necessarily present itself, and a risk that I would encourage everybody to be careful of with this Google Gemini and Microsoft Copilot everywhere. So the first one is just a everyday practical watch out to anybody who's watching and listening to this. Having Google and Microsoft shove AI in your face everywhere, offering to do for you literally everything, might be nice on the surface. And I will admit, even I've found that I actually do like the fact that I have the option of a high-powered AI assistant everywhere I go. And I think this is very much indicative of what we're going to see in the future and the kind of things we're going to get used to, which is where I'm going to say it's going to present us with a challenge. But if you've played around, go out and do it. I think you'll see it can be helpful. In fact, I was just doing something the other day for some consulting work I'm doing where I had written something for them that I needed to tweak it down. And normally what I would do is I'd have to use different AI tools, or I'd spend a bunch of time, revising it myself. And it was great that right built into the tool, I could just say, hey, can you take this and then, tweak it this way? And boom, right there, it took care of it and went back. And I like that. I like that, Google automatically now, if I want meeting notes, I don't have to have a separate app, which is going to disrupt a whole bunch of players now, but I don't have to have a separate app. It can just take care of it for me. That's been convenient. So I think this is an indication of what we're going to start to expect. But I think here are the watch outs. First of all, one, I think we need to be careful because we can become way too over dependent on this, and it's going to lead to really not healthy behaviors in us. I see how we become so, just as an example, I see how we become so dependent on same day delivery, 2-day delivery, whatever, that I'll see people treat the person delivering their groceries like garbage because it's like, you took too long, or pizza took 15 minutes longer than you said. And people just lose their mind over it because we're just so used to this constantly being served in an instantaneous fashion. So one, I'd say be careful that this doesn't start creeping into the way you start treating the people around you, that you don't start treating them like your digital assistant who is there to serve your every need on demand. And if you don't like what they did, you can just chew them out and they'll fix it. And they don't even ask any questions or say, hey, could you maybe be a little nicer about it? Because I do see this potentially starting to shift our human behavior. And that is a watch out that I think we need to be really, really, really careful of, because it'll start to creep in little ways as you're just now so used to everything you're doing. You just have an AI that takes care of all the little things. Suddenly the way you start talking to your spouse or your kids or the people who are helping take care of you at a store or whatever starts to seem a little bit more like how you're treating your AI assistant. And so whether that means practicing being kind to your AI assistant, I'm sure if you were to look at my conversations, you'd be like, why do you say please and thank you? Like, AI doesn't care. And it's like, well, it's because I don't want to start developing the habits where I treat AI like it's worthless and just there to meet my needs. And I also don't want that to creep into my behavior and how I treat other people. So be mindful of it. That's one of my watch outs to you on this. The second one is this. Be careful how dependent you become on this. I have already seen this where we are very quick to get rid of the things we don't like to do or the things we don't have time to do, but we refuse to say, well, I'm not going to do it. We just go, well, I'll just let AI do it. I'll just let AI do it. I'll hand it off over here. And we just keep slowly relegating more and more of our life to AI without even realizing it. So not only does it have the potential to be changing our behavior and how we treat other people, it also has this little subtle tendency to start stealing our attention and really robbing us of aspects of our lives as we just go, yeah, well, I could do that, but why bother? I'll just let AI take care of it. And that's not me saying don't use AI. It's me saying be thoughtful and intentional and cautious as you think about this, because if you don't, you may find yourself losing parts of your experience and trading it for convenience and actually missing out on a lot of what life has to offer. And I think as I see Microsoft and Google starting to insert itself everywhere, the temptation to do that is going to become more and more and more. And I think about, Apple repealed some of its AI features, but I think about how, Apple AI is going to be there. ChatGPT added its tasks thing where now you can just basically have it take care of things for you. You don't even have to do it. You just say, you literally, and just as an example, don't do this, But you literally could tell it to make sure you send my mom a email in my voice on her birthday, wishing her a happy birthday and letting her know how much I think about it. And then I don't have to do it. I'm just going to automate that. And there is so much pressure right now to just say, automate everything in your life. Just automate it all, automate it all. And I would push back on that and say, one, be careful what you automate, because you might automate some of the most meaningful and important activities in your life. But two, sometimes we need to just say no. We just need to stop doing things. We don't just need to keep finding ways to, I just don't have time. So boy, if I could automate all this useless crap I'm doing, then I'd have time to do the other stuff. Why? So you can fill in the cracks with more useless crap you're going to have to automate later? Just cut back. Just cut back from some of this stuff. You don't need to just freaking automate all the garbage that you're doing today. Take a look at your life. We're at the beginning of the year. Take a look at your life before you go ask Gemini or Copilot or OpenAI to automate your life. How about take the time to look at your life and decide what aspects of this are important, what things aren't, what things are important but not necessarily important for me to directly do that can be automated, and what things are really distinctly important and I'm not going to let anything automate that. And maybe going back to my example of, I could make an agent send everyone in my contact list a personal birthday note from me, but it's not really me. Well, maybe I have it remind me of who they are and a few facts about them so that I actually remember to do it and make time to do it. That would be a better way to have AI automate certain tasks to help you have a more enriched human experience. And that's where I would just challenge people to flip the way they're thinking about this, because this whole push of automate all your life, if we aren't intentional about it in our own lives, we're going to end up getting to the end of our years here and going, I accomplished so much, but none of it mattered. And I just think of the wisdom of Solomon, where it's like, it's all meaningless and it's all a vapor. So don't you want to make the most and appreciate the vapor that's there while it's there, instead of going, how can I push the vapor over here so I don't have to pay attention to it, so I can make more vapor that's just going to do, it's just, I think that's my biggest concern with that. So those are the two practical watch outs for everybody. The other thing that's a little bit interesting on it, and this is separate, is this may help curb any concerns, or not any, but help mitigate some of the concerns of my last, we're going to experience a global catastrophic event. That's one of my predictions as a result of AI, is Google, Microsoft, all these things trying to shove AI everywhere in my face, paired with some of these things I'm seeing where, like, Sam Altman's now trying to say, hey, like, let's temper our expectations around AGI. I'm seeing even some of the biggest tech leaders who are tech enthusiasts who are like, everything's AI. AI is the most important thing, the best thing in the world. All of a sudden they're starting to go, well, I mean, it's not the best thing that's ever happened. People's expectations are coming down on the front end. Now we're shoving Google, Gemini, Microsoft, all this. I look at some of the financials of some of these big AI players. They're desperately scrambling to find out how they're going to make money on all this stuff they've invested in. Part of me is starting to feel like maybe what's happening is we're realizing AI isn't quite what it really promised it could be. And we're reacting accordingly. And so I think we got to be careful, because that's why Google and Microsoft want to shove it in your face. It's almost like, I'll be careful how I make analogies to this, but it'd be like if you had an addictive drug that, you had made very difficult to get, but it was really, you believed it was super powerful. And then all of a sudden people started realizing, like, life was more important. I wasn't really interested in taking this drug anymore. And so you went out and you made the drug free and you offered it to everybody all at once. And, and your whole goal was to try and get people addicted to it so that they would want to come back and buy money. And in some ways, I'm not saying that's exactly what's happening, but I'm getting a little bit of that feel around the AI. And even when I talk to people, they're going, I use it, but it's not changing my life. type of a thing like I expected. And so that puts the tech players in a really interesting spot, which people don't usually make smart moves when they're desperate. So I'll be interested to see how it plays out. That's what's on my mind right now. I had a couple other ones that I was going to talk to, but I am way over time. So I will likely bump those, or who knows, with the Pazer things are going, they may just have to go, and I'll talk about different things next week. But with that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Hope you enjoy your time with family or whatever. Get out. I don't mean get outside. It's freezing here, so I wouldn't encourage anybody to do that. But just make the most of the time you have with the time that you have it. With that, we will see you on the other side.